You see? And when I was ordained a deacon, what the bishop does is he hands you the book of the Gospels. Have you ever been to a diaconate ordination before? And it's pretty powerful. Priesthood's much more ornate, but they're both very beautiful ordinations. The diaconate's actually very moving because that's when a man takes the promise of celibacy and obedience for the first time. So it's really like you're all in, pretty much. Yeah? And then the fulfillment of that comes the next year when you become a priest. So when Father Sam was being a deacon, he was in. He's now given his life completely to God, and a year later, he was given the faculties to be able to absolve sins and to be able to anoint the sick. But he did, and I did, when we became a deacon, we promised to be faithful to the bishop. But we were also given the gospel to say, now, you as a deacon are called to teach God's people. And when you go to bed at night, you're like, what did I just sign up for? Like, wow, your life's dramatically changed. Now people look at you as an authority. Even like our permanent deacons, when they're around, they're kind of an authority. They are. They're called to teach, to preach. And when they handed us the gospel, they said this prayer. It's very beautiful. Believe what you read, teach what you believe, practice what you teach. It's powerful, isn't it? Let me see it again. Believe what you read, teach what you believe, practice what you teach. Many of the saints say the greatest sermon is what the priest does, not what he says. So, now, in the first catechism of the Catholic Church, then we'll go on to start getting into the tongue a little bit. Now notice, why is he saying this? Because he's talking maybe primarily to teachers. And he's saying, your tongue is very important. But you've got to use that little thing appropriately. All right? And there, in the early church, there was an early teaching called the Didache. Does everyone know what that is? The Didache? That was kind of like the first catechism of the church. Written document. And there's in the catechism that we have today, it actually references the Didache. So if you hear that word, the Didache, it's just the first, where they set down what is the church teachings. Then Didache means to basically teaching. Okay, that's what it means in Greek. And it says this in one of the Didache, chapter 11, verse 1 to 2. Not that I've ever read this, but I just pulled this off the internet. It says, accordingly, when a visiting Christian teacher teaches you, all that has been said, welcome him. But should the teacher himself be a turncoat and teach a different doctrine so as to undermine this teaching, do not listen to him. But if he promotes holiness and knowledge of the Lord, welcome him as the Lord. So even in the teaching, it says, hey, if you get some bum teacher who comes and says something that's not in line with the church's teaching, don't listen to him. As we call that a heretic. All right? And unfortunately, in my travels, you'll find priests like that. You'll find deacons. People will actually come with, really wanting to know, what does God say about this? And because they're cowardly, they'll say something that's not true, trying to appease the person. But that person will be responsible if that person takes a direction that's not godly. You see? All right, now, then he goes on to say this. So he talks about teaching, and I hope some of you still consider being CCD teachers next year. But he goes on to say, for we all fall short in many respects. If anyone does not fall short in speech, he is a perfect man. Now, in some translations where it says fall short, does anyone have slip up? No? Okay. In some of the translations it says everyone slips up. Okay? But in your translation it probably says fall short. But I think if you were to look at the original Greek, slip up is probably closer to the original Greek, but it's actually more fun to play with that. Because he says everyone slips up at times. All right, now, what does it mean to slip up or fall short? Now, one of the truths that James is speaking about is that many times when we sin, it's not really a deliberate, premeditated action. Okay? A lot of times what happens is you kind of think like, oops, I slipped. And what happens is, if we put our guard down, whatever your predominant weakness is, you kind of what? Slip up. Okay? And I think if you're walking with the Lord, that's probably your sin patterns. You don't like get up in the morning like, all right, I can't wait to go sin today. Hopefully, right? You've grown up a little bit, right? But if you fall into sin, it's more of what? I slipped. And he talks about it. He says, we all slip up. And we know in sacred scripture that a just man slips up 7 times a day, more or less, you know? And that's why we examine our conscience every night. To, you know, we do slip up. Hopefully not in major ways, but very, probably, you know, venial sins here and there. And the church has always said it is impossible to go your whole life without sinning. It's you're going to slip up, right? So he's making that point. We all will slip up. And so he's saying rather it's not being prudent or letting our guard down and that we fall into weakness. But then he goes on to make this point that there is no sin easier to fall into than the sins of what? The tongue. Where do you think we slip up more than any other type of sin? With the most frequency, as he says, with the tongue. I mean, if you really just examine your conscience about today and think, okay, just take that one aspect. What was the quality of the words I used today in every conversation I had? If I were to give it sort of like a charity sort of, would it be like, 10 being really charitable, 5 in the middle, 2 you failed. Where would it go? And so, putting into proper context, he's saying with speech and teaching, James is saying the following thing. Sometimes one unintentionally, now remember he's talking to teachers, someone unintentionally misspeaks, and sometimes one can be misinformed or misled by someone in authority, and these are not errors of intent. But anytime a teacher has his own agenda or knowingly teaches contrary to the teaching of the church, that person is guilty of heresy, which is a serious sin. So it's one thing to slip up. Like you're teaching, you say something, whoops, that didn't sound right. Well, then if it ever happens, if you're teaching, what do? You just correct yourself. And even as a preacher, sometimes I said something like, that didn't come out right. You slip up. Or you're trying to correct your kid, and you go back to the kitchen, you're like, wait a minute, that wasn't really the way I wanted it to go out. It could be misinterpreted. Okay? But there's a difference between that and then deliberately, what? Having an agenda and teaching something that's not true. And it's very dangerous. All right, now turn with me to Proverbs chapter 15, 1-4. And keep your finger on James 3. Now Proverbs is just a really powerful part of the Bible. It's just sort of wisdom literature and just little sayings that, if you ever want to have fun in the holy hour and kind of get knocked around a little bit, read Proverbs. Because it's just like little sayings that just really cut to the heart. All right, so if you turn to Proverbs chapter 15, 1-4, it says this. A mild answer turns back wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. The tongue of the wise pours out knowledge, but the mouth of fools spews folly. A soothing tongue is a tree of life. Okay, and then, but a perverse one breaks the spirit. You see how he kind of goes back and forth? And we're going to see this with James. He's going to say, look, if you use your tongue, the tongue can be used to help so many people. You ever meet that person like my spiritual director, unnamed, but every time I talk to him, he just says the right thing. If I need to be picked up, he kind of does it. If I need to be kind of put back in place, he puts me in place. But it just seems like the Holy Spirit's got his tongue guiding it. And every time I walk out of a meeting with him, it just seems like I was spoken to by who? God. That God used his tongue to guide me to get closer to Christ. Now, wouldn't that be beautiful? Everyone saying that about us? Wow. Every time I talk to him or her, she just made me closer to the Lord. My mood is better. I'm uplifted, Now let's talk about, I kind of want to take a turn here, because he's kind of generally go through sins of the tongue. And I kind of want to go through some of the sins of the tongue, and then we'll go back to Scripture, okay? So we bring it down to the practical, and then we go back to Scripture, because then when he used the analogies with the rudder and the ship, and the bridle and the horse, the bit and the horse, bridle, we'll realize what he's trying to say here. Okay, now, what are some sins of the tongue that people commonly offend people or God and others with their tongue? Well, first is just false witness, basically lying. All right, it says in Proverbs chapter 25:18 the following. You can look it up on your own, but it's Proverbs 25:18. A man who bears false witness against his neighbor is like a war club or a sword or a sharp arrow. Okay, so that's just a person, just a liar. As a priest, especially when people come for help, you can never help them if they lie to you. You're not going to tell you the truth. Well, we're not getting anywhere. And we'll get that at the end of this chapter. He's going to talk about someone who's wise is sincere. I have no problem with someone's like, hey, Father, my life's a mess. Okay, great, let's talk about it. But then you get the person, they're like, oh, things are great. I'm just life's great, family's great, prayer life's great. And then you hear the wife, and wait a minute, it's not the same person I talked to. Right? It's sort of like a double sort of, justifying with the tongue. Another thing is detraction. Now, this is a common sin, but I want to define this well, because a lot of people talk, well, Father, I gossiped, and I struggle with gossip. Now, it's a very easy kind of sin to fall in, but let's define what it really means to gossip, okay? Because, when you're in little communities, the tendency is, you get little groups and you talk about people and you're like, well, we need to pray about this person, and this is why. And then all of a sudden it turns into this, you just find out things that, wait a minute, I didn't need to know that. Was it really necessary for you to tell me? And we can sugarcoat it by saying, well, let's pray for the person, right? But really, we're looking down upon them, all right? But detraction is this: disclosing another's faults and failings without a valid reason to others who did not know them. Okay, now that's different if there's this huge blow up in your family and everyone knows about it, and you're kind of around the dinner table, how do we deal with this? That's not gossip. It's just it's just prudential, okay. Or you had some church meeting, and I don't know, it just went south, but everyone you're talking was there, and you discuss it. That's not necessarily gossip. You're dealing about the issue, right? Because everyone knows about it. But what's detraction? Detraction is, we'll say you're part of that group, and you go outside of the group, and someone who really doesn't care about your group, but you just want to vent. And they're like, I'm in this church group. Someone, oh yeah, I know her. Well, do you know what she said? And then all of a sudden what happens? You just ruined her reputation because the person didn't know about it, and they think what? Less of them. Does that make sense? So it's telling the faults of others to people that, for no reason whatsoever, just basically so you can feel better about yourself. We had a line in the seminary. We said, we talk about others to make ourselves feel better, which is true. And then I remember there's one guy, he's just great, and I'll remain unnamed, but in my whole time, because seminary can be sort of a drama fest sometimes, and there's just so much going on in that building with 75 guys and all these personalities and this and that, and people driving you nuts. And there's one seminarian, he'd always walk away from a conversation where someone's getting thrown under the bus. And I noticed it. He's a really good priest. But he would just really not partake of these conversations which were unnecessary. Now, he would also be the guy to talk to the person because everyone else is too cowardly to go to the person themselves. And I think that's a rule of thumb. If you're going to talk about someone and their faults, well, ask yourself this: why don't I go to them out of love? And that's also called what? A fraternal what? Correction. No one likes doing that. And then they'll say this: well, why? Because I don't want them to feel bad. Well, you're gossiping about them and ruin their reputation. Well, why don't you just, as a sister or brother, speak to them? Because you love them. But it's so much easier to what? Talk about the facts, huh? Now, statements where we begin, well, you know, are often warning signs that conversation is about to get juicy. And the more likely they do not know, but someone is about to make sure you do, often such gossipy reports begin with paying a compliment to the one about being talked about, and then turn south. Okay? Now, a worse sin, a much more serious sin than that is calumny. Okay? C-A-L-U-M-N-Y. This is often the Catechism of the Catholic Church. The difference between this is you say harmful lies about someone that ruins their reputation. Okay? Now that's much more obviously malicious. I think most people with a good head just don't do that, okay? Unless you really have an agenda, okay? So if it's a lie and you put it out there and ruin the reputation, that's serious, okay? Sometimes that happens to priests, it happens to bishops, it happens to moms, dads, people in groups, okay? Another one which is a little bit subtle is flattery. And I think as Americans, this is a big one. Does everyone know what flattery is? Flattery is, let's say you're in a conversation, right? And, it's just something awkward. You don't know how to handle this, right? Okay, here, let's take it. It happens. You're sitting you're drinking beers at a Memorial Day picnic. And, your friend comes up, she's a Catholic, and, we just went to my son Bobby's house, and him and his girlfriend just moved into this beautiful house, and, it was just really nice, and, they're thinking maybe one day they'll get married, and then you sit there with your friend, oh, that's nice. All right, so in a sense, to just sort of placate and you just go along with it, that's flattery. It's saying something that's not true, and it leaves that person thinking or justifying their reaction to something that probably themselves are not comfortable, but by you flattering them, then it becomes what? Acceptable. Okay? This is actually very common. Now, this doesn't mean, sometimes it's not appropriate to just deal with it right there. The best thing to do is just say nothing at all. And you can just say, I'll pray for them. So, what do you mean? I'll pray for them. But then I think too, maybe down the road say something to help the situation. It's, maybe not at that point to it. Flattery distorts the truth when it falsely attributes certain good qualities or talents to another. This is usually done to ingratiate oneself to individuals or for some ulterior motives. There's tons of examples of this. Or they're talking about a movie that's just awful. But it's interesting. You think that peer pressure is just a teenage thing? I got news for you. It ain't. Adults fall into the same categories because we like to be what? Fit in. Kind of cool, right? All right. What else? Sarcasm. Sarcasm actually, all right, now, St. Thomas Aquinas says something very interesting. He said sarcasm is the lowest form of humor. Now, this is from one of the holiest and smartest guys that ever walked. Now, hey, when you're in Southern Maryland, everyone's sarcastic, right? But Bowie's even worse. All right, I got that on camera. All right. But there is, do you ever notice when someone's always sarcastic, you just stop taking them seriously? And you know what sarcasm is really? You know what it is? It's a defense mechanism. It's like, we'll make light, or we'll just make a quippy comment. It's like, someone's afraid of getting a nerve touched, It's sort of it's like a way of putting up a wall. I want you to pray, if you're a sarcastic person, I want you to ask yourself this question, why am I always sarcastic? All right? Why do I have to use this glory? It gets a little old sometimes, where you can't take anything seriously, or you can't see the positive in anything either. You know? It's always like, gotta bust on it, gotta bust on it, gotta bust on it. You know? It kind of, it's sarcasm, you know what it does? It kind of drains energy after a while. Now, sometimes it's good to joke. I'm not saying we all joke with people, but if you keep doing it all the time, it's sort of a lack of charity, I think, right? All right. Oh gosh, we go on and on and on. All right, well let's just stop there for now, okay? All right, now let's. Pope Francis, he said this. Those who live judging their neighbors, speaking badly of them, are hypocrites because they don't have the strength, the courage to look at their own defects. It's pretty biting. All right, now let's go back. Now he's going to talk about the tongue in verses 3 to 5, and he's also going to say how this little piece of our body is so powerful. Now let's look what he says. He says, now the positive thing is this: if we can perfect our speech, guess what? We're going to be what? Perfect. But the honest thing is, it's the hardest thing to do is the speech, and even saints struggle with this. You know, they really struggle with how to say things, when to say it, how to do it. Okay. But all right, but he goes on to say, if we put bits into the mouths of horses to make them obey us, we also guide their whole bodies. Okay, now, how many here have ridden a horse before? Just out of curiosity. Okay, now, notice, I mean, you see the bit, it goes into the mouth, and the horse it's very sensitive when you just yank the bit. 'Cause, I mean, can you imagine how a piece of metal stuck in the back of your teeth and you're yanking it, and what happens is wherever you move the bit, the horse turns its mouth, and it guides the whole body. So, if you don't know anything about horses, you need to have that sort of image. And so he's basically saying is that just as that little bit is just a tiny little piece, little thing of metal, it controls the whole body. You know? And the other thing is, I remember the first time I rode a horse, I got up and I made the mistake of pulling back on the bit. Guess what happened? I almost got thrown off. The horse went on two legs, you know? They're like, let go, you know? Because I was yanking the bit. Okay, and then I realized, okay, gotta be gentle with it. All right. And then he goes on to say, in the same with ships, okay? And then it is also the same with ships. Even though they are so large and driven by fierce winds, they are steered by a very small rudder wherever the pilot's inclination wishes. Now, I mean, if we have any Navy guys, sailors, you know, people on sailboats, you know, if you look at it, that always mystified me where, you know, you're in a boat and you just have this little thing going, you know, and you just move that thing and this giant ship moves in that direction with this tiny piece. And so James is just showing us what? That this tiny little thing we have called the tongue, which is more than this tongue, but it's how if you don't have a tongue, you can't speak. You know, this has great power, and it can really bring a lot of harm if we don't control it. I took a quote from the St. Pius V Catechism for you traditional people out here. For these words we learn two truths. The fact is that sins of the tongue are very prevalent, and the other truth is that the tongue is the source of innumerable evils. Through the fault of the evil speaker, often a loss of property, the reputation, the life, and the salvation of the injured person or of him who inflicts the injury. Okay, and so James goes on to say that, you know, I mean, in a sense, this interpretation that sometimes the bad words can actually, you could lose a soul. If you tell them something, you tell them to sin, or you tell them to do something that's wrong, I mean, you could lose a soul over this. And then he goes, that's why he says, in the same way, the tongue is a small member and yet has many pretensions. Okay, so this idea, this little tiny thing we have can have a great impact for good or evil. You know, St. Thomas Aquinas makes a great observation. And he said, people that struggle with gossip also struggle with overeating. In a sense, like, they drink too much, they eat too much. And he says, if you can't control what goes out of the mouth, you're also going to have control what goes what? In the mouth. Now, it's interesting to think, oh, come on. But it kind of ties in what James is saying. if we control this thing, it actually controls what? The whole body. And you think about it, I mean, most people's sins start with a conversation. Hey, what do you think about doing X, Y, or Z? It's usually, you don't just, there's some kind of, many times there's a conversation, or a use of the mouth, or some kind of suggestion that's put out there, maybe by another person, or a television show, or something that just gets the whole thing rolling. So once again, it goes back to the power of the tongue. I mean, it's very powerful. All right, let's go on. So then he kind of, and like I said, this is going to make you think a lot next week, because it made me think, because I had to read this all day, okay? And then he goes on to say this: consider how small a fire can set a huge forest ablaze. The tongue is also a fire. It exists among our members as a world of malice, defiling the whole body and setting the entire course of our lives on fire. Itself set on fire by Gehenna. Oh my gosh. And this is, he said, the tongue is this fire that comes from hell. Wow. All right? And all right, so let's unpack that. Just like if you take a cigarette, you're hiking, and you take up a tub and you throw it in the woods, and it's summertime, and you've got some dry leaves, like Smokey the Bear says, only you can prevent fires. Like, a little tiny thing. Now, in Palestine, at the time of Christ, Palestine, have you ever been to Jerusalem? We'll have to go to Jerusalem, right? Field trip. All right. If you go to Jerusalem, the air is very dry. It's very desert. So a lot of the plants are what? Dry. And so when I was there, I actually witnessed a couple of fires. And so that's just another fire. This is normal, And because, something would go off, or maybe it was this, and because there's no precipitation many times, there's a lot of stuff they can burn. Okay? Now, you've all heard the story about St. Philip Neri, about the woman. It's probably been used by myself, Father Sam, and like millions of other priests. I'll just read it to you. The story is often told of the most unusual penance St. Philip Neri assigned to a woman for her sin of spreading gossip. The 16th century saint, actually his feast day was on Saturday. He's a great saint. Instructed her to take a feather pillow to the top of the church bell tower, rip it open, and let the wind blow all the feathers away. This probably is not the kind of penance this woman or any of us would have been used to. But the penance didn't end there. Philip Neri gave her a second and more difficult task. He told her to come down from the bell tower and collect all the feathers that have been scattered throughout the town. The poor lady, of course, could not do it, and that was the point Philip Neri was trying to make in order to underscore the destructive nature of gossip. When we detract from others in our speech, our malicious words are scattered abroad and cannot be gathered back sometimes. They continue to dishonor and divide many ways, months and years after we speak them, as they linger in people's minds and pass from one tale-bearer to the next. And here with that telephone game, it gets a little worse once it gets down the line, right? All right, now, he goes on to say in verse 7, for every species of beasts and birds, of reptiles and creatures of the sea, is tamed and has been tamed by the human race. But no one can tame the tongue. It is a restless evil and full of deadly poison. Now, let's unpack that. What did he just say? What did James just say there? He says, look, we as humans, we are able to tame the most malicious beasts. Now, Americans, I don't think we're necessarily into this, but if you go to African countries, some of these guys have pet tigers and lions, and it's kind of cool, right? Oh, pet tiger, Sacred Heart tiger, yeah. I don't think priests should have dogs. I have my personal thing about that. I just think it's too much care. We should be given to souls rather than a canine. But I think it would be cool to have a pet tiger, Pre-cana, So address, okay. Simba, come in. Bring your complaints. Leave them at the door. All right. But in Nigeria, there you can look. There's all these great these Nigerians. They really mastered apparently taming hyenas. And they go on these little shows where the hyena comes up, and they hug the hyena, and baboons wearing football shirts take money looking at the wild animal shows. And also they actually teach kids how to train reptiles and snakes, like the boa constrictors. It's bizarre, you know. But they actually do. They actually tame these animals. If you have enough patience, you can do this and don't get bitten. But what he's saying here is, unaided by grace, James is saying it's easier to tame a tiger or a hyena or a boa constrictor than the tongue. I think there's some truth to that. You know? I think there's some truth to that. All right, moving on. All right, so we go back to this. Then he says this, remember he said that it's full of poison. And then he goes on to say this, with it we bless the Lord and Father, and with it we curse human beings who are made in the image and likeness of God. Isn't it amazing how a person could go to Mass and then on Sunday afternoon say something vile to their spouse or their kid or a family member, or cuss at them? I've always had a huge problem, and obviously I can't go into detail, but when you hear some stories about what some husbands will say to their wives, I think if that guy said it to my mom, he wouldn't have teeth. Or vice versa. I mean, sometimes wives can say the most malicious things to their husbands. And you're married. And it's almost like, yeah, that's what we do. That's how we speak to one another. But it really is something. I mean, look, you got it. The whole thing is that this is something that has to be dealt with, because if the other way I put it is, if I put a bug in your living room or your bedroom, and I was able to record conversations, would I be scandalized by it? Do we take it? Do we take to heart that there's something that needs to happen, needs to change, because our words have impact on people we speak with. I don't think a priest should cuss, amen? Well, what about you? Cursing, Well, a person can go to Mass and then use God's name in vain. And habitually say God's name in vain. And say, well, I'm working on it. Well, wait, don't just work on it, stop. Ask for the grace to stop cursing His name. What did He do to you? He's not the one who busted his toe, you busted it. He's not the one that dropped the milk on the floor, you dropped it on the floor. But the thing is, it's just because, we bring, we use His name. He says, there's a quote I found, he's a saint in the church and a devil at home. Is someone with a tongue that's loose. And so the tongue can wound or soothe. It can speak the fairest or the foulest things. St. Josemaria in the Way, on his chapter on holy purity, he says, never speak of impure things or events, not even to lament them. Remember that such matter is thicker than pitch, changes subject. Even just perverse conversations that Catholic guys would get into, or girls. It's just your speech. And here's the other thing. Don't let your kids get away with it either. Don't let them get away with it. I mean, what they do outside in the back, or whatever, if they're going down the street, fine. But not in your house. That was the thing growing up, was God's name in vain, out, cussing, out. All right. James is making the point that the same mouth that can say the Hail Mary is the same mouth that uses God's holy name in vain. Now, blasphemy is directly opposed to the second commandment. It consists in uttering against God, inwardly or outwardly, words of hatred, reproach, or defiance, or speaking ill of God, and failing in respect toward him in one's speech, and misusing God's name. And it says this in the Catechism, St. James condemns those who blaspheme the honorable name of Jesus by which you are called. You know? Now, the worst way to say it is when you say G what? D. Oh, when I hear that. You know, there's two words, it's just like, no, don't work. Right? I actually have I came up with a method to stop the God's name in vain thing, or even cussing. You ever heard of my junk jar thing? It's all right, so say you have start with language, cussing, vile mouth, or God's name in vain. Make a thing called a junk jar. And every time you violate it, you slip with God's name in vain. Remember he said we slip up, right? Or you slip up with some kind of cursing, or maybe just you kind of, or something you said at someone you love. And it's a pretty serious slip up. You put some amount of money that you come up with into the jar. And every month you give it to the church. Preferably Sacred Heart. Okay? Now, I want to redo the sanctuary and put in marble, but I think if we did this, I could put it in gold. It would be beautiful. Now, either I'm going to have this beautiful sanctuary, or people will stop doing it. And I think, too, the problem is we just don't hold ourselves accountable with our words. And that's what James is telling us. It works, the junk jar. Taking responsibility. All right. So then he goes on to say, and I love this line, he says, "This need not be so, my brothers. Does a spring gush forth from the same opening, both pure and brackish water? Can a fig tree, my brothers, produce olives or grapevine figs? Neither can salt water yield fresh." All right, so he's saying that, can if you go to a river or a mountain and they have that spring, you're not going to get brackish in there. It's not made for that. And he's saying that, a fig tree wasn't supposed to produce olives. And what he's saying is, our mouths were not to produce what? Vile words. And he's basically saying it doesn't, does it? He's basically saying, this need not be so, my brothers. You don't need to talk that way if we take it seriously. If we really ask for the grace, Lord, anoint my speech. Help my words to be helpful. Now, let's take the opposite. Think about the most powerful preachers. For instance, you ever heard of St. John Chrysostom? All right? I didn't know this. Do you know Chrysostom was not his name? They actually gave him that name after he died. Do you know what it stands for? It translates into golden mouth. Because his words were so powerful from the pulpit that he changed so many lives. Now, it's interesting when you read about St. John Chrysostom, there's some irony. He battled all his life with tendency to slanderous talk, because a lot of priests didn't like him because he's very strong, and he felt he wanted to just get him back and yell back at him, but he battled this. He was a very fiery guy, and so if you gave it to him, he'd give it right back to you. And this is a struggle he had until the day he died. The slanderous thing was more before he was a monk, but when he became a monk, he took a vow of silence. And that didn't work out. Anyway, over time, through the grace of God, he managed to completely defeat his bad temper, and he got complete control of his tongue. And then his tongue was used for nothing but good. And it was a powerful weapon for God. That's why they call him Chrysostom, golden mouth. St. Anthony of Padua, right? Poor St. Anthony, always ever known for his finding my car keys. But what was St. Anthony really known for? Do you know what he was really known for? His eloquent preaching. They said the first time he preached, apparently there was an ordination And it was supposed to be a bunch of Dominican priests, and they weren't ready, and the guy got the flu, and like, okay, we'll use the Franciscan, and he got up and just knocked it out of the park. And there's a lot of stories about him. He would, sometimes when people would listen to him, he'd go out and preach to fishes, and they would listen to him. He was that powerful. When they exhumed his body years after he died, guess what? His tongue was incorrupt. All the rest of his body was in ashes, but his tongue was, God kept it. And he actually, it's total Catholic, and you can see it on display. There's the tongue of St. Anthony, Okay. Another trip we'll have to do, a field trip, is Rome, right, and Italy. And it's kind of neat, because we always talk about, the beauty of the body, and, buried, but everywhere we go, there's so-and-so's finger, arm, his heart. All right, that's another class, okay, called relics. But how we justify that, all right. Yeah, but anyway, I was at the one of my favorite saints is St. John Vianney, and I was going to the place where he has his house, and there's this little chapel, and there's kind of like this, in the door there's like this. You go in and there's like this circle thing. I'm like, it looks like a heart, and then they said it's his heart. I'm like, what's it doing up there? It's sacred heart. It's Vianney's heart. But anyway. The rest of his body's buried. All right, actually, no, it's incorrupt, and it's you can see it. His body never corrupted. It's a sign of saintliness. Another great, one of the greatest American preachers. If you ever have a chance, YouTube Fulton Sheen. If you're ever down and you just need a picker-upper, just type in YouTube Fulton Sheen and just listen to one of his homilies. His way with words was masterful. And so much so that when he was preaching back in the 50s and 60s and 70s, which were turbulent years, right? He was the most watched television show. More than like the big comedians at the time. And there's a really beautiful story. And there's a book called Treasure in the Clay. It's his autobiography. It's a gem of a book, because you just get to read his life, and I've read it, and I probably will read it again. But there's this picture, they have a picture, and there's this picture, it's kind of like, what's happening? But he's hugging, well, let's put it this way, John Paul II is hugging him, and he's weeping. And I'm like, what transpired in that conversation? So in the little sort of side note, it said this, on October 7th, 1979, 7 days after celebrating the 60th anniversary of his priesthood, this is Fulton Sheen's 60th anniversary of priesthood. Oh, I got 12. Good grief, that's a lot more. In St. Patrick Cathedral in New York, when John Paul came to the United States, John Paul II embraced Archbishop Sheen and told him this: "You have written and spoken well of the Lord Jesus. You are a loyal son of the church." And it just came out of him, like all his hard work. You realize that he's at the end of his priesthood. But to have John Paul say that to you, can you imagine how uplifting that is? And then it says, on December 9th, 1979, which is only, what? Was 2 months later, he died. One of the last things he heard was the Pope, another saint, tell him, "You've spoken well of the Lord." And you think about how many people, because he used his tongue, not to just tear into people, but to speak about Christ. How many souls he touched and brought to heaven? Only he'll know when he went through the pearly gates, and we pray that someday he'll be canonized. Right now there's a big war about his body. I don't know if you heard about this. He's from Peoria, Illinois, and then New York. They don't want to give it up, So anyway, that's for higher uppers to worry about that one. Okay. Hebrews chapter 3, verse 13. It's a good thing to think about. The writer of Hebrews says, "Encourage one another daily, as long as it is called today, so that none of you may be hardened by sin's deceitfulness." It's interesting that, now obviously we're not sure if it's St. Paul. I kind of take the school of thought that it was Paul, but we're not sure. But whoever the writer is says, encourage one another daily. And and it's kind of what James is saying, is that our words can really pick people up if you just say the right thing. And what does it mean to encourage another or use the tongue? Well, it points out evidence of grace in another's life to help them and see that God is using them. It points us to God's promises that assure us that all we face is under His control. Sometimes people just need to just a kind word. Hey, what's up? How you doing? You doing okay? How's the family? I don't know, do we do that enough? I don't know. I don't think so. The saints did that kind of stuff. They always had the right thing, Verse 13. All right, now we're going to kind of go into, do we have time for this? No, we're not going to get all of it, but we'll get close to it. All right, verse 13. So that's kind of the whole thing of the tongue, and I think we're transitioning out of it. And then we go into, it says, true wisdom. And basically, what James is going to speak about is what is true wisdom, or living a wise life. And he goes on to say in verse 13, who among you is wise and understanding? Let him show his works by a good life, in the humility that comes from wisdom. But if you have bitter jealousy and selfish ambition in your hearts, do not boast and be false to the truth. Okay, so let's unpack that. So the first thing he's going to do is talk about what is wisdom. Essentially, it's a person that is a life of good works and humility. Humility and meekness. Okay? Now, the sign of a person, according to James, living a wise life, is manifested on the humility of his actions. And Matthew Kelly has the expression, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. We've probably heard this before. And he used the word humility in Greek is prautos, P-R-A-U-T-E-S. And this is a person who's the opposite of being aggressive, angry, and violent. Okay, now, it doesn't mean this doesn't, I think sometimes people think that saints were just pushovers. They were far from that. They were very strong people. Mother Teresa was a strong personality. You could, if you never tried to lock horns with her, okay? Any priest that tried to argue with her was shot down. She was she's strong, but there was a control in that strength, okay? And she was very convicting with her words. She wasn't necessarily great, violent, or angry, right? And the other word it's as close to is what we would say meekness. Now Jesus would say what? Blessed are the meek, for they what? Shall inherit the earth. All right. Now you probably heard me. This is one of the Beatitudes, right? Now every time I talk about this one beatitude or this idea of having humility, all right, or this meekness, so to speak, is someone that has a control over their anger when they speak. Okay? And a lot of times when people, you ever notice the critique people have is, it's not what you said, it's what? It's how you said it. I'm being sarcastic there. Strike one, okay? All right. But a lot of times if we just kind of dial it down on the tone, and you can say something, in control, and you can be forceful. Even when you're correcting. My father was the master of this. I probably can count on my hands the times my dad blew his top. You have to really mess with him to get him angry. My mother's very Irish, But Dad, he had this way of correcting you very firmly. But it was in such control, you felt so guilty. Do you know what I mean? It just was so effective. Because you're it's like mind games. Are you angry? Yeah, he's angry, but he's too cool to be angry, but he is angry. He's looking straight at me. And it was just it's masterful. And a lot of times when you blow your top, it's just having an episode. But when you're in control, that's the thing about meekness, is you just, You have a way of saying it and delivering a message that's forceful, but not angry. It's because it's more if you make it about yourself rather than you make it about the other person. That's the point. And I think the possibly make it about me, right? A great movie I reference to is, you ever seen the movie 41? I'm sorry, is it 41 or 42? Yeah, 42. And there's this great scene. I always bring it up when people are they're struggling with like things with mouth, their anger issues, they call them. I haven't watched this little clip from the movie, and it's very effective, right? And so Jackie Robinson, he was, he's a great ball player, And so the story is Branch Rickey's trying to bring him into the major league, and so he basically flies him up to the Bronx, and there's this scene where Branch Rickey, played by Harrison Ford, who was awesome in this movie. Like Harrison Ford is a great actor, but he just nailed it in this one movie. And he's got a cigar in his mouth, and he's like, Jackie, I want to make you the first black baseball player. What do you think about that? And Jackie Rob's like, are you kidding me? Like, yeah, well, and he did give him a pretty intense salary too. I mean, he's making some money. And he's like, what's this all about? And then he turned and goes, now are you going to ruin this for me? And he said, what? He goes, when they start calling you all kinds of names and saying the N-word and this, and he goes, I can't say that, but answer me, he says something else. And Jackie Robinson gets up, and he goes, you want a man who has the guts not to fight back? And then Branch goes, no, Jackie, no, I want a man who has the guts not to fight back. It's just a great line. In other words, when someone comes at you, can you control yourself not to fight back? That's what saints did. And if you don't fight back and you keep your cool, guess who won? You did. You win. And anyway, watch the movie. It's fantastic. But then he goes, you give me a uniform for my back, I'll give you the guts. And sometimes, I'll tell you what, man, when someone comes after you, it takes everything in your heart not to fight back. And it takes a big dose of what? Humility. Because a lot of times when we blow up, what is it all about? It's our pride, right? All right, let's do one more, and then we'll finish it. Verses 14 to 16. He says, now that's kind of what a real wise person is, someone that controls their anger, has a sort of humility, which is not being weak. It just means I'm not going to cower, I'm not going to make it about myself, and I'm not going to let this person drag me down. I know I'm made in the image and likeness of God, I'm going to move forward. Okay, then in verses 14 to 16, he describes someone who's not living true wisdom, and this is where we're going to finish next time. But if you have bitter jealousy and selfish ambition in your hearts, do not boast and be false to the truth. Now, someone bitter jealousy has an intensely negative attitude toward another person's achievement or success. One thing that James is saying that a lot of our tongue problems come when we're not happy when we see someone else succeed. Now, one of the things I think too is, in the human heart, we have this need to be what? Noticed and loved, which is a good thing, right? But when does it become problematic? When it's inordinate and we'll do anything to be noticed, or say anything to be noticed. Or as Bishop Barron said, he defined envy as this, or this bitter jealousy. He says, envy is when your best friend succeeds and something in you dies. Now, where do you see this? On the baseball field. I remember me in college, me and Jeremy Lindell, I still remember his name. We were about the same height, same everything. And the coach was back and forth, back and between of us at right field. And I got to tell you, I'd sit on the bench like, strike out. So I wanted to get in there. You should be like, hit the home run. But I want to get out there. And I'm sure when I was at bat, he's saying the same thing to me. You know, but there's something in the human heart was we don't like to be second place. And this is where the tongue gets in. And we start, or, you know, we can get into envy. You know, I guess a modern day example of this is, remember, what was a figure skater? Yeah, Tanya Harding, right? And Nancy Kerrigan. All right, and it was it Tanya Harding actually hired someone to break her leg with a pipe. I mean, how bad does it get, you know? So she could compete at the Olympic and win the gold medal. I mean, that's the epitome of envy, you know? Anyway, okay. So, and also selfish ambition. You know, what does that mean? Selfish ambition is disordered when we have an excessive desire to get ahead in life. And basically saying is this, is if our whole MO, our way of living is just to one-up someone, guess what? Your tongue is going to go all over the place. Right? Because the only way you're going to one-up is you got to what? You got to chop them down. You got to talk bad about them. You got to undermine them. You got to undercut them. Right? So he's saying this is not wisdom. Okay? And the problem with this, with selfish ambition and envy and pride, is it's the ego gets in the way. All right? Write this down. Ego. E-G-O. Edging God out. Edging God out. Anytime our ego gets in the way, we're kind of pushing God out of it. And we're making it more about what? Me, myself, and I. And I think really, James is going to say this, every argument is sort of that. We take God out of the situation. We're not really concerned about the other person's feelings or thoughts or whatever. And we're just primarily concerned about what? Me. You know, and it just never works. It just kind of becomes sort of a vicious cycle. All right, let's stop there. Now, I need you to mark this for me and remind me, is where he says, do not boast and be false to the truth, because I explain why boasting is wrong. Okay? But let's just end with that. Why is boasting wrong? Once again, it's about not what God is doing through me, but what I'm doing. You see what I mean? And we give ourselves more credit that we what? Deserve, because everything you have is a gift from God. Okay? So let's end there. All right, let's turn to Our Lady. I heard she's very good with her words. Actually, what was the last words that Mary ever said? Come on. Do whatever he tells you. Right? That's the last words of Mary in the Bible. Very well spoken. She always made it about Jesus Christ. All right, so let's turn to her and ask that from today until next Tuesday, that you will be perfect with your tongue. Or at least till 9:30 tonight. Amen? All right. All right. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen. All the angels and saints, pray for us. In the Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Amen. Okay, Bible scholars, have you met our seminarian yet, Kevin? Okay.